that's so interesting because communism always talks about absolute materialism. And if you view yourself as just what can one individual do against this massive authoritarian system? But really, when everything you've been saying, like when people get together, when they form these bonds of trust, this whole, I don't know what you'd call it, like this emotional or spiritual connection that transcends this absolute materialistic view, that's actually incredibly powerful. And that's why, communist regimes always try and clamp down on that side of the human experience.
Any kind of civilized society, any kind of religion or spirituality, like any kind of thing that you could believe in that would give you the power to feel that kind of like hope and, I guess, empowerment.
Because it is so powerful. And if you are stuck thinking in terms of just everything as being absolute materialism, there's no room for that incredibly powerful human force to activate.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And it's interesting when you think about it, right? Because in communist country, they always emphasize how people have to work together, how people have to be, have that sense of collective. But of course, in China's case, they are the first ones to destroy any sense of the collective when they're faced with, political organizing and dissent. So in a lot of ways, the Chinese Communist Party right now is really not communist anymore. I think it has developed its own sort of religion based on dictatorship, based on mass control, based on surveillance. And that's why we're seeing, the terrible, terrible crimes against humanity in Uyghur region. But at the same time, a lot of patriotic Chinese actually think that, it's justifiable. They think that, it's for the betterment of the country. And I think that is also extremely dangerous, is when the Chinese government is actually trying to use the mass, the Chinese people, to brainwash them into this patriotic mass that would consume any propaganda that is fed to them. And they are actually the ones that have been doing a lot of transnational repression as well. So, for example, recently here in the US, there was a Hong Kong protester who was posting up flyers around his college campus in Cornell. And when he was pasting up the flyers, there was, a Chinese student following him around and started, saying things to him in Mandarin. And all of a sudden, that Chinese student came up and pushed our Hong Kong protester onto the ground. And of course, this Chinese student, he is actually, very diehard patriotic of the Chinese government. He believes in whatever the parties say. But of course, he's not affiliated with the state or anything. We don't think that is the case, but he truly thinks he's acting for his government righteously. And that is very dangerous. Imagine if, everyone is brainwashed by the CCP and thinks that way. It can really do a lot of destruction to the civil society we're trying to build and the freedom we're trying to build right now.
It reminds me of that case was it Manchester in the UK, where there was that protest outside the Chinese consulate, and then the consulate authorities dragged in a protester and started beating him up inside the grounds of the consulate. And then later the consul general of that consulate defended himself to Sky News by saying that I was doing the right thing by, I was defending my country. And the reporter was like, you were pulling this guy's hair. And he's like, yeah, I think that was justified. It was just this kind of insane rhetoric that yes, it is my duty as a patriotic Chinese person to pull the hair of this Hong Kong protester. That is how I show I love my country.
That's beautiful.
It's unbelievable. I think right now it's almost like a war on storytelling at the same time, because the Chinese government is really good at fabricating stories and, finding the way that can sensationalize whatever that is happening outside to feed to its audience, so that, the people in China, the people who consume Chinese state media, including sometimes even Americans, I see some Americans who are extremely supportive of the CCP for I don't know what reason, but they would really support that sort of rhetoric the Chinese government has been putting out. So the CCP is actually great I have to say that they are really good at making that sort of story, kind of like replicating the Cultural Revolution as well, is making good stories that would turn the mass into their strongest supporters. So they don't even need, a lot of foreign agents, I would say. They can just use the mass to do a lot of these dirty work for them. And they wouldn't get, a lot of consequences as well, because it's the mass, is not the state affiliated agents. So I think that is also, something to be mindful of. And I remember actually, I was studying in, when I was in college, I had some classmates who are from China, and they did show me that when they have to go abroad for study, all of them, I think, have to download some sort of or follow some sort of page on WeChat. And that page is about news, international news, actually. But all the international news are written in a way, in a rhetoric that suits what the CCP wants people to hear and listen. And these students cannot unfollow that page. They have to, they don't have to read it every day, but they just have to follow it. But of course, it's going to appear on their newsfeed. So even when they're studying outside, even when they're studying abroad, they're still consuming this sort of rhetoric fed by the Chinese government. And eventually they would think that, the world is evil. Only the CCP knows what they're doing, and they're truly good to the people. This kind of rhetoric that is always brainwashing the many people who are either inside of China, overseas. But I do have to say, even with that, we have seen earlier with the Situng Bridge that there are still a lot of Chinese nationals who are very conscious of what has been going on. They are supportive of the Hong Kong movement, supportive of, freedom and democracy, and they understand what the CCP has been doing. So even with that, I think we always have to make that distinction between the Chinese government and the Chinese people, that even though the Chinese government has been able to mobilize a lot of Chinese people, not every Chinese person, not every people from China is actually automatically supportive of their government. But I digress a bit, but that is something that I have been observing, and it's quite a historical turn to see how the Cultural Revolution is coming back again.
I do think that you see them implementing some of those things in Hong Kong. Like now they can do the patriotic education campaign, right? Like there's nothing that's going to stop them from doing that.
Because if you protest it, then you're violating national security.
Yeah, so there's no way to stop that anymore. But like you mentioned with your Chinese, like the other Chinese students at your university, like that is the kind of thing that has been going on in China for decades, and is now going to happen to Hong Kong. It's